In this video, we're going to take a look at a rational expression here, and we're going to go ahead and just kind of simplify this. Now, when I teach this, I try to break everything down into 3 or 4 steps. That way, people it does a couple things. First of all, it kind of breaks it up for people so it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. The second thing is it kind of gets people used to this idea of referring back to things, so it's kind of like a function that's being called within a computer program. So especially if you're going into computers, it kind of follows that idea. So we're going to factor all of the things to start off with. Now there's a couple of techniques here that we can kind of use in order to simplify things. First of all, we notice that there's only one x and one y in this upper, or in the left-hand numerator, and it's all being squared. Well, since there's only one of each of x and y, we can't factor that any further. It is factored. So we can write it later on like this, whereas x minus 2y times x minus 2y. That's perfectly fine if you'd like to do it that way. Or you can just keep it as x minus 2y quantity squared. The numerator on the right-hand side is also factored. It cannot be factored any further. So now what we need to do is factor both denominators. So this is my step 1. I'm going to factor. There's kind of a trick that you can use, and you have to be very careful about how you use it, but x squared minus 5xy plus 6y squared. Typically when students come across this for the first time, they're like, whoa, I can't do anything because of the y squared. Okay, well, if it's in this setup, you might notice that if I were to dirty 4-letter F word out this, that I would get an x squared term. If I did the O and the I won't say it, and those that know me know why. But if you multiply the O and the I, so you get x and then this negative y and then negative y times x, you get a negative 2xy and then a plus, because you have a negative y and a negative y make a positive y squared. So what you'll notice is that you have the xy term in the center, and then you have a y squared term on the outside. Now, if I were to just simply kill the y, and so I'm going to make this a 1, and this a 1, then wherever I see a y, I just put a 1. Well, that shrinks down to x squared minus 2x plus 1, which, you know, just kind of says that, oh, we can just ignore the y and just shove it back in there when we're done. So that's kind of the trick that we're going to use. And so I'm just going to rewrite this as x squared minus 5x plus 6. And then we're just going to shove the y back in when we're done. So I need two numbers that multiply to give me 6 and add to give me 5. And that's a 2 and a 3. Now, this second sign says that the signs of the factors must be the same. It does not tell you. This sign here does not tell you whether or not they're positive or negative. It just says they have to be the same or different. Now, the middle sign will tell you what the larger factor has to be. So because 3 is larger than 2, the 3 is going to carry a negative, and they both have to be the same, therefore they both must be negative. The only way to get an x squared in the front is to have an x in the front of both. Now, if we go back to the y squared, the only way to have a y squared in the back is to have a y in back of each. Now I just stick in my 2 and my 3, and I'm done. That's factored. So just a little piece, but it has to be xy in the center. If you don't have the xy in the center, don't mess with it. It'll be bad. So this one is going to shrink down into x minus 2y, x minus 3y. Still on the first step here. So now I've got this x squared minus 4xy plus 4y squared. We're going to utilize this same technique. I'm just going to go ahead and eliminate the y's, leaving me with x squared minus 4x plus 4. And then I'm going to go ahead and factor this down. Well, I happen to notice it follows this same pattern here, where I have effectively a perfect square on both ends. And then if I take the roots, and I take this central sign, and I square it, in order to get the center sign, or the center term, I would just go ahead and I would multiply the stuff inside and then double it. So negative 2 times x is negative 2x, doubled is negative 4x, which is what we have. Therefore, this is the factoring. Now, before we call ourselves done, we have to go back and we have to shove this y back in there, just like we did over here. And so we're going to call this x minus 2y quantity squared. And now that'll clean it up. So this becomes x minus 2y quantity squared. And now I'm going to rewrite the whole thing, but as I do that, I'm going to squish it together because that's what the operation tells us to do. We're multiplying, so we're just going to go ahead and multiply all the pieces. Do not expand it right away. We want to cancel everything else. So I take my second piece here, and I'm going to take this x minus 2y quantity squared, and I'm going to divide that by, and now I'm going to replace that with my factored versions, x minus 2y and x minus 3y. And then, instead of putting the multiplication symbol in there, I just know that I multiply straight across on these fractions. The whole x plus 2y goes in parentheses. It is one unit, so it's x plus 2y in parentheses. And then in the denominator, I have this x minus 2y quantity squared. My dog is getting very anxious since I took over her room. Finally, we factor anything that's left, but in this case, in addition to subtraction, you'll probably have things to factor beyond the second piece there. But we don't have anything to factor because it's all factored and multiplied. So we can go ahead and skip that and go straight to number 4, cancel. So we're going to cancel out anything that's the same. We notice we have 2 factors of this x minus 2y on the bottom, 2 factors of the x minus 2y on the top. Those will cancel out. I do not have a factor of x plus 2y on the bottom. I have an x minus 2y, but I do not have an x plus 2y. So our final answer is just going to be this x plus 2y left on top. I'm going to put it in parentheses. You don't have to because it is the only thing in the numerator. And then in my denominator I have x minus 2y and x minus 3y. Now, I do not recommend that you expand any of this back out. Just leave it in factored form and let it be. Some books might expand this out. If that's the case and your book does that, then go ahead and expand this to make sure that you have the same answer as the book. Otherwise, just leave it alone. It's fine. It won't change anything. And that's it. That's how you do this problem. It's not too bad, really, once you get the hang of it. The factoring pieces, that's usually where people get stuck on. And so the factoring will tend to bog people down. Oodles and oodles, billions and billions and billions of videos out on YouTube of factoring. I know of about 5 or 6 different ways to factor. So I just kind of teach students that need to factor a certain way, and that's perfectly fine for them. All right, hope this helped. Take care.